Andrew Hunter had always believed his life was picture perfect. A successful architect living in the heart of San Francisco, a city known for its towering skyline and endless fog, Andrew had everything he could ask for, except, perhaps, the peace of mind he thought he deserved. He had been married to Amanda for 10 years, and over that time, he grew to believe that he knew her inside and out. Their relationship, steady and predictable, seemed like the foundation of his world. Every Friday night, without fail, Amanda would go out with her friends. She always referred to it as girls' night, a time to catch up and unwind. Andrew didn't mind. He appreciated her maintaining friendships outside of their marriage, believing it was healthy for both of them to have time apart. For him, it was the perfect opportunity to relax on his own, watch a movie, read a book, or even catch up on work that had piled up during the week. It was a routine that, in his mind, worked perfectly. But one particular Friday night in February, Andrew decided to take matters into his own hands. He would surprise Amanda by cleaning her car. It had always been a mess, empty coffee cups, receipts, and old parking tickets cluttering the back seat. As he moved through the clutter, something caught his eye. A parking ticket. It was wrinkled, as if it had been hastily shoved somewhere. What struck Andrew was the date, the exact same night that Amanda was out with her friends. The time, the location, it didn't add up. He examined the ticket further. The address listed wasn't a bar or restaurant, places Amanda often mentioned when she came back from her weekly outings. This address was a luxurious apartment complex in the northwest corner of the city. It didn't make sense. Why had she never mentioned it? Why was she parking there? A sense of unease began to crawl over him. He wasn't the jealous type, but the evidence was right in front of him, plain as day. For the first time in their decade-long marriage, doubt began to seep in. His mind raced, thoughts spinning wildly. He needed answers. At first, he pushed it aside. Perhaps it was just an innocent mistake, or maybe Amanda had parked there by accident. But the nagging feeling wouldn't leave him alone. He couldn't shake the thought. What if something was going on? What if everything he thought he knew was a lie? Andrew's curiosity got the better of him, and he decided to investigate. He knew Amanda's email password. It was her birthday, after all, and she had always been too trusting about that detail. He hesitated for a moment, but then clicked on her inbox. He was looking for anything, any sign that might explain the ticket, any clue that could offer some sort of explanation. At first, it seemed harmless enough. The usual work-related emails, a few online shopping promotions, and a couple of newsletters she subscribed to. Then, one email caught his eye. It was from someone named David Richards. The subject line was innocuous enough, looking forward to tonight. But as he opened the message, everything shifted. "I can't wait to see you tonight," the email read. "I'm counting down the minutes until I see you at the apartment." Andrew felt the blood drain from his face. His heart began to race. This wasn't a work email, nor was it a message between friends. The tone was intimate, familiar. The kind of message one would expect from someone much closer than a casual acquaintance. His hand shook as he clicked through a few more emails. The next one read, "Last night was incredible. I can still smell your perfume on the pillow." Andrew's chest tightened. He had no more doubts. The woman he had trusted, the woman he thought he knew, was involved in something far deeper than a harmless night out with friends. A pit formed in his stomach as the weight of the discovery settled on his shoulders. He felt betrayed, confused, and utterly lost. His mind couldn't process it fast enough. How had he missed the signs? Had it all been a lie? But there was no time for second-guessing. The truth was clear. Amanda was having an affair. The questions flooded his mind, but the answers were simple. He had been living in a lie for years. And now everything had changed. With a steady hand, he closed the laptop and sat back in the chair. His mind raced with the realization that his life, as he knew it, was about to unravel. But he had to act. He couldn't sit idly by. He needed to confront Amanda. He needed to find out the truth once and for all. He stood up, his mind set on the next steps. But what would he do? How would he face her? How would he navigate the storm that was sure to follow? One thing was certain, nothing would ever be the same again. Andrew's life had taken a sharp turn, and there was no turning back. Andrew spent the rest of the evening in a daze. He couldn't concentrate, couldn't sit still. The world outside his apartment, The lights of the city seemed distant and detached. Everything felt unreal. The hours passed slowly, but his mind was racing. What was he supposed to do now? Should he confront Amanda tonight? Or wait for her to come back and pretend everything was fine until he could gather more evidence? But deep down, Andrew knew he couldn't wait any longer. The trust he once had was shattered, and every moment spent pretending everything was okay was just another lie. He couldn't live in that lie any longer. He needed answers. Around midnight, he finally made a decision. When Amanda came back from her usual Friday night out, Andrew would confront her. He had the evidence, the emails, the parking ticket, the lies. He would lay it all out. No more games. No more hiding. This had gone on long enough. He couldn't shake the thought of the apartment. The image of Amanda walking into that luxurious building with David, the stranger, clinging to his mind. A rush of anger swept over him, but it was quickly followed by an overwhelming sense of hurt. The woman he thought he knew, the woman he had built his life with, had been keeping secrets from him, and now everything felt like a betrayal. Andrew's mind was fixed on the next step, confronting Amanda. As he waited, the minutes felt like hours. His heart thudded loudly in his chest. Was he ready for this? Did he want to hear the truth, no matter how painful it might be? His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of Amanda's car pulling into the driveway. The familiar hum of her car engine was the same as it had always been, but to Andrew, it now sounded like a distant echo from a life he no longer recognized. His hands tightened around the armrest of the chair. He could hear her footsteps outside the door. Amanda entered, greeted him with her usual smile, but Andrew wasn't fooled by her cheerful demeanor. He couldn't ignore the crushing weight of the secrets that had been hidden from him. As she placed her keys on the kitchen counter, Andrew stood up, his voice steady but filled with a quiet rage. "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice calm but cold. Amanda looked up, surprised by the seriousness in his tone. "What's going on?" she asked, her expression shifting slightly. Andrew didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I know about David," he said, his words cutting through the air like a knife. Her face paled instantly, her eyes flicking nervously toward the door as if she were about to make a run for it. But she didn't. She stood frozen, staring at him. For a moment, it felt as if time stood still between them. "I don't know what you're talking about," Amanda replied, her voice shaky, but she couldn't meet his eyes. Andrew shook his head slowly. He took a deep breath, trying to keep his emotions in check. "I found your emails. I know about the apartment. I know about everything." Amanda's eyes widened, and for a moment, she opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She took a step back, as if the weight of Andrew's words had physically pushed her. Her gaze darted to the floor, unable to meet his. "I didn't mean for you to find out like this," she finally whispered, her voice small, almost apologetic. Andrew felt a wave of frustration wash over him. He clenched his fists, trying to hold onto the fragile composure he had left. "How long, Amanda? How long has this been going on?" Amanda closed her eyes, tears starting to form in her eyes. "I'm so sorry," she said, barely able to speak through the choked sobs. "I never wanted to hurt you. She stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Andrew couldn't believe his ears. All those years, all the moments they had shared, now seemed like a lie. His heart felt as if it had been ripped out of his chest. How could she do this? How could she betray him like this? "It's too late for apologies," Andrew said, his voice low and controlled. "I've seen enough. I don't want to hear any more excuses. You've been lying to me for years, Amanda. I don't know how to look at you anymore." The silence between them was deafening. Amanda stood there, her face pale, tears streaming down her cheeks. She looked small, fragile, as if the weight of her actions had broken her. Andrew had always been the one to comfort her, to hold her when things got tough. But now, the roles had reversed. He wasn't here to console her. He was the one who was broken. David's name hung in the air like a shadow, a constant reminder of the betrayal Andrew had discovered. He couldn't let it slide. Not this time. He wasn't going to play the fool any longer. "I've already contacted a lawyer," Andrew continued, his voice steady but firm. "The divorce will be filed first thing tomorrow morning. This is over. Amanda's face crumpled at the sound of those words. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She had no defense. No excuse could erase what she had done. Andrew turned and walked toward the door, his heart heavy but resolute. "Goodbye, Amanda," he said, his voice quiet but final. "I'll be out of here soon. The divorce papers will be delivered to you." He stepped outside, closing the door behind him with a soft click. The cool night air hit him like a slap in the face. For the first time in years, he felt free. But the freedom came at a steep cost. He had lost everything: his trust, his love, his marriage. But he couldn't dwell on it. Not now. There was no going back. Andrew walked into the night, his footsteps echoing in the quiet streets of San Francisco. His heart was heavy, but the anger that had consumed him moments earlier had begun to fade into something different. Emptiness, perhaps. It felt strange to be out in the open, with no one by his side, no one to lean on. He had always imagined a different ending for his life, one that involved more love, more connection. But now, all he had was the cold night and the bitter taste of betrayal. He stopped at the corner of the street, looking at the glowing lights of the city. The skyline, once a symbol of his success, now seemed distant and meaningless. He had thought his life was perfect, but now he realized how fragile everything had been. What had he been building all this time? What was the point of all the effort if it was all based on lies? A part of him wanted to just walk away, to leave the city, leave everything behind. But then there was another part of him, a quieter part, that told him he had to face the consequences of what had happened. He couldn't just run. Not anymore. Andrew knew what he had to do next. The next morning, he walked into the lawyer's office. The cold, sterile walls of the building felt like a symbol of the battle he was about to fight. The divorce papers had been drawn up, and the process had officially begun. He didn't know what to expect next, how long it would take, how much pain it would cause, but he knew one thing. This was the only way forward. The lawyer, a woman in her mid-40s with a no-nonsense attitude, handed him a stack of paperwork. "You'll need to sign these forms today. Once everything is filed, the ball will start rolling. I can't promise a quick resolution, but it will be thorough." Andrew nodded. He had no illusions about the process. It was going to be messy, painful, and drawn out. What was the only option left? By the time he returned home, the apartment felt strange. It felt like a place he no longer belonged. Amanda's presence lingered in the rooms, even though she was no longer there. The silence was oppressive, and it felt like every corner of the apartment was a reminder of the life he used to have. The phone rang, breaking the stillness. It was Amanda. "Andrew." Her voice cracked over the line. "Can we talk?" Andrew's first instinct was to hang up. What more could she possibly say? What was left to talk about? But a strange sense of curiosity held him in place. "I'm at the apartment," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm sorry. I know this is over, but I need to explain. Please." Andrew hesitated. He didn't want to hear excuses. He didn't want to hear about David, about whatever happened between them. He was done with explanations. But part of him, some small part that had once loved her, wanted to know. "I'll come by," he said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. Amanda's apartment was just a few blocks away from his own. As he walked there, his thoughts were clouded. What was he expecting from this conversation? Closure? A confession? Or was he just going to hear more lies, more words designed to manipulate him back into a situation he didn't want to be in? When he arrived, Amanda was standing in the doorway. Her eyes were red from crying, and her hands were clasped tightly in front of her. The apartment looked the same, cold, empty, sterile. No sign of warmth. No sign of love. "Come in," Amanda said softly, stepping aside to let him through. "I've been thinking a lot about everything. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to understand." Andrew didn't say anything as he stepped inside. He couldn't find the words. His chest was tight, and he just wanted to get this over with. Amanda sat down on the couch, and Andrew followed her lead, taking the seat across from her. They sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of the situation pressing down on both of them. "I was lost, Andrew," she began, her voice trembling. "I know that doesn't excuse anything, but I felt neglected, invisible. I thought David understood me in a way that you didn't. I never meant to hurt you. I didn't know how to tell you. Andrew's heart hardened as he listened. It wasn't the first time he had heard these words, and it wasn't the first time someone had tried to justify infidelity. "And what about the lies?" he asked quietly. "What about everything you told me about your girls' nights? What about all the times you made me believe everything was fine?" Amanda's eyes filled with tears. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice barely audible. "I wasn't strong enough to face the truth. I didn't know how to tell you that I was unhappy. So I lied, and I made choices I regret. I was selfish." Andrew shook his head. He didn't want to hear any more. The words were empty now, meaningless. They couldn't undo what had happened. "I don't know what you expect from me, Amanda," Andrew said, his voice steady but cold. "I can't fix this. I can't go back. I won't." Amanda let out a shaky breath, her shoulders slumping. "I know. I just wanted you to hear me out." Andrew stood up slowly, his legs heavy. "I've heard enough," he said. "We're done." As he turned to leave, he saw the broken look in her eyes, but it didn't affect him the way it once had. He was no longer the man who would do anything to save their marriage. That man had disappeared the moment he found the parking ticket. Amanda called after him, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. He had already made his decision. And as he stepped out into the hallway, Andrew felt a strange sense of relief. It was over. The days that followed felt like a blur. Andrew moved through them mechanically, as though he were stuck in a routine he couldn't escape. The apartment, once filled with the noise and energy of a shared life, now felt like a cold, desolate space. He tried to fill the emptiness with small distractions. Work, late-night walks, reading, but nothing seemed to take away the sting of the betrayal. Amanda's calls became more frequent, each one more desperate than the last. She wanted to meet, to talk, to fix things. She pleaded for a second chance, but Andrew had no more energy for hope. His trust had been shattered, and no apology could put it back together. He had always prided himself on being a rational man, a man who approached problems with logic and thoughtfulness. But now, in the aftermath of his shattered marriage, emotions took over. Anger, hurt, and confusion roiled within him. But there was something else as well, a sense of finality. He had made his decision. The divorce papers were filed, and the process was set in motion. It wasn't going to be quick or easy, but it had to happen. Each time Amanda called, he let the phone ring out. He couldn't bring himself to pick it up. He didn't want to hear her excuses, her apologies. There was nothing she could say that would undo the damage that had been done. One afternoon, while sorting through his things, Andrew found a photo of him and Amanda from a few years ago. They were on a beach, laughing together under the sun. It seemed like a lifetime ago. The couple in the photo felt like strangers now. The woman in his memory was someone he thought he knew, someone who had shared his life with him. But the woman in front of him was someone entirely different, a woman he no longer recognized. The photo slipped from his hand and fell to the floor with a soft thud. It was a symbol of everything he had lost, but it was also a reminder of what he was gaining: freedom. He wasn't sure what his life would look like after the divorce, but he knew it had to be better than staying in a relationship built on lies. As the weeks passed, Andrew settled into the new rhythm of his life. He didn't rush into anything. He wasn't looking for a rebound. He needed time to heal, to rediscover himself. He started going to therapy, something he'd never considered before. It wasn't just about dealing with the pain of his marriage falling apart. It was about finding a way to move forward, to build a future where he could trust again. His friends were supportive, though some of them didn't quite understand why he hadn't tried to work things out with Amanda. They told him he should give her a chance, that people made mistakes. But Andrew knew what he needed. The pain of betrayal was too deep, and the wounds too fresh. He couldn't put himself back in a situation where he would be left vulnerable to the same hurt. Amanda sent him messages. She sent him flowers. She begged him to reconsider. But Andrew remained firm in his decision. The divorce would proceed, and there would be no going back. One evening, as he sat in his favorite chair with a glass of wine, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Julia, a woman he had met a few weeks ago at a mutual friend's party. She was kind, understanding, and had recently gone through a divorce herself. Their conversations had been easy, and there was something comforting about her presence. Julia had been through her own heartbreak, and Andrew had found solace in their shared experiences. She had never pressured him to talk about his ex-wife, but she listened when he needed to share. Tonight, the message read, "I know this is a difficult time, but would you like to go for a walk tomorrow? I'd love to spend some time with you." Andrew stared at the message for a long time. He wasn't sure if he was ready to open himself up to someone else, but the idea of walking through the park, sharing a quiet moment, felt like a small step in the right direction. Maybe, just maybe, it was a sign that he was starting to heal. He typed a response, "I'd like that." The next day, they met at the park. It was a simple walk, but something about it felt different. Julia didn't ask him to talk about the past. She didn't push him for details. She just enjoyed the present, and that was something Andrew hadn't felt in a long time. For the first time in months, he felt a flicker of hope, a sense that he could move forward. The walk was just the beginning. Slowly, but surely, Andrew began to allow himself to trust again. Not completely. He wasn't ready for that yet. But he began to feel a spark of what it was like to be around someone who respected him, who saw him for who he truly was. It wasn't the same as the love he once had with Amanda, but it was something different, something that felt healthy, something he deserved. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, Andrew's life began to take shape again. It was a life that no longer revolved around the ghosts of the past. He had learned to let go of the bitterness and the pain. He had learned that even the most devastating betrayals could lead to a new chapter. And in that new chapter, Andrew was finding himself again. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, he felt ready to face it. Time had a way of healing Andrew, though he didn't always recognize it as it passed. The raw pain of betrayal had dulled, and while it would never truly disappear, it had begun to take its place as just another part of his story. His days were more productive now, his thoughts less consumed by what had been lost. He had embraced his new routine, and for the first time in months, he felt like he was moving forward instead of standing still. Julia had become a steady presence in his life. Their walks in the park, quiet dinners, and long conversations had built a foundation of trust, something Andrew had been terrified to open up to again. With her, there was no pressure to rush into anything. She understood the delicate pace he needed to set. She didn't want to fix him. She didn't need him to be someone he wasn't. She just wanted to be there, to listen, and to enjoy whatever moments they shared. That in itself was enough. Andrew found himself laughing again, genuinely laughing. He rediscovered his love for long Sunday mornings spent reading and cooking. He no longer carried the weight of guilt or second-guessing. He was starting to enjoy his own company once more. And for someone who had been engulfed by the constant noise of a crumbling marriage, this was an unexpected but welcome change. Then, one evening in late spring, as the city bathed in the soft hues of sunset, Julia suggested something that made Andrew pause. "Have you thought about taking a trip?" she asked, her eyes alight with curiosity. "Somewhere you can just breathe, clear your mind. Maybe it would help to get away from everything here." Andrew had considered it, but only vaguely. He hadn't felt the need for an escape. He had been focused on rebuilding the life he had left behind, not running from it. But as he stood in the soft light of the evening, he realized how little he had truly explored his own freedom. Perhaps it was time to embrace something entirely new, to fully reclaim his life. A few weeks later, Andrew and Julia found themselves on a quiet beach in Northern California, the sound of waves crashing against the shore providing a soothing backdrop to their conversation. The trip had been exactly what Andrew needed. It wasn't just the scenery or the peaceful solitude. It was the space it gave him to think, to breathe. As they walked along the sand, Julia turned to him, her voice soft yet certain. "How do you feel about the future, Andrew?" The question hung in the air for a moment. It wasn't a loaded question, but one that Andrew had been hesitant to answer. The future had always been a blurry concept, something distant, something uncertain. But here, on this beach, with the wind tousling his hair and the sun setting slowly behind them, he realized he could see it more clearly now. "I think I'm starting to see it," he said, his voice steady. "I've spent so long focusing on the past that I forgot there was a whole life ahead of me. I don't know what that life will look like, but I know I want to face it with someone who's going to be there for me, not someone who's keeping secrets." Julia smiled, the warmth of her affection evident in her eyes. I think you're ready for whatever comes next. For the first time, Andrew truly believed her. He wasn't entirely healed. He wasn't perfect, but he had come so far from the man he was just a year ago, lost in his own pain, consumed by the weight of betrayal. Now he stood at the edge of something new, something unknown, but something he was willing to embrace. They spent the remainder of the weekend exploring the coastline, talking about their hopes for the future, and for the first time in a long while, Andrew felt peace. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't pushing. He was simply living, finally living in the present. By the time they returned to the city, things had shifted. Andrew was more grounded, more sure of himself. He knew that his journey wasn't over, but it had taken a turn for the better. With Julia by his side, there was a sense of partnership, of growth, and of hope. It wasn't the happily ever after he had once imagined, but it was a kind of happiness that felt real, honest, and earned. Andrew stood at the doorway of his apartment, looking out at the city skyline. The past no longer had a hold on him. He had rebuilt his life, piece by piece, and now he could look forward to the future, not with fear, but with a quiet confidence. He had learned that sometimes the most painful experiences lead to the greatest personal growth. The betrayal, the heartache, the uncertainty, it had all been part of his journey. And now, it was time to move forward with a sense of purpose and a heart open to whatever came next. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Andrew realized that the future was his to shape. And for the first time in a long time, he was excited to see where it would take him.